Okay, so last week we started on the negative side. First, we had a kind of utopian potential vision, kind of messianic vision at the beginning of the Torah portion of Bechukotai. And then we had the negative side, which was so far pretty negative. And there were a couple things that we were talking about. One of them is the word here that keeps on coming up. Second here.
We talked about coldness, or
right, that word. The word, it has different possibilities. It could be indifference. It could be, it's the word carry here. The word could mean indifferent. It could mean cold. It could mean like indifference. It could mean like a kind of randomness. And this word is one of our key words in this section. Again, if you act this way with me, I'm going to act this way with you. And so like in this one, which they translated as hostile. That was one of the translations, if you remain hostile toward me in 21. But then we saw Linda in her notes had those options for different meanings for this word, which comes up, without other context, we're not really sure. Although, again, it could be related to certain other words that come up, like that word with korcha baderech, with Amalek, asher korcha baderech. So it could mean it chilled you along the way with Amalek, but it also could mean it greeted you with a kind of indifference. The Jewish people come out of Egypt with an incredible reputation, a lot of momentum, and then the Amalek shows complete indifference and attacks. So again, that word comes up a lot. So we were talking about that. So it came up like at least 7 times in this discussion. Also, we're talking about that notion of like karma, measure for measure, that God responds measure for measure. If we act this way, he responds in kind. And I was suggesting to you that this is something that seems pretty consistent, even when it doesn't actually state it as a maxim. It seems like this is what happens. Like, for instance, in the Yaakov story, after Yaakov takes the bracha from Esav, he ends up finding out that his father-in-law switched daughters, and that he ends up having Leah instead of Rachel. And Lavan's response to him was, I don't know about where you come from, but in our place, we don't marry off the younger one before the older one. And you could just hear that as a kind of echo of Yaakov's sort of trying to replace Esav, or standing in the place of Esav, taking the blessings from the firstborn. And there's just so many of these. God says to Paro, Israel is my firstborn son. If you don't let out my firstborn son, I will kill your firstborns. So there's just so many of those instances that you really get a sense that this is part of the system as Tanakh reveals it to us, that there's a kind of mirror to our behavior. If we act righteously, then good things happen. If we act unrighteously, then harsh things happen. Even though it did say, not necessarily exactly in the same measure, like he said before, I will, in verse 28 here, he said, I will act against you sevenfold. For my part, I will discipline you sevenfold for your sins. So there is a corresponding reaction, but not necessarily exactly in the same measure. So we saw that.
What do you think of that next line that says, you shall eat the flesh of your sons and the flesh of your daughters? That's pretty.
Right. That is a terrible statement. There is a moment in the Book of Kings where it's a very similar kind of story to when Shlomo is faced with the two prostitutes who are arguing over a child, and he says, we'll cut him in half. And then, so there's an incident. This is during the life and times of Elisha the prophet. So the king of the 10 tribes, a woman comes before him, because the kings, again, just like with Shlomo, they would take members of the public who would bring their grievances to the king, and the king would decide. So a woman came before him, and her grievance was that she had a deal with another lady that when their children died, they would cook the child and they would split it. So her child died, they cooked him and they split it, but now now this other woman's child died, and she won't share. She won't split the child with her. So and then he tears his clothing, and he has Elisha called, and he says, enough, this is enough. And then Elisha cries out, and this was the results of a terrible famine, and there was a siege against the city. So this kind of terrible thing happened. Again, why would a loving God speak this way to people, and why would this even be a possibility? It sounds so harsh. So one of the things you'd have to say is that when these things are laid out, this is like a point of slightly deeper theology, but in the world of slightly deeper theology, there's an assumption made that God doesn't change. The Rambam makes this point, that it's axiomatic that God does not change. God is a kind of simple oneness. He doesn't change, and so he doesn't have like emotional back and forth. So when the language is characterized that way, it's being written that way for us. In other words, God himself is the inner workings of God himself are not available to us. We don't understand how God himself works in his innermost being, although mystics try to understand it as they get deeper and deeper, but we don't really. And the Torah is not really sharing God's innermost working. What the Torah is sharing is our experience of in our relationship with God, how we experience it, or how we would interpret it, or how we would characterize it. It's almost like it's not quite just poetry, but it's sort of like poetry. In other words, we're in a sense anthropomorphizing. So it would be like a sailor talking about a sea as if the sea was a person, and how she's angrily thrashing the ships, or a storm, as if it was a person, and how it is, or like this blizzard. Imagine somebody would characterize it as a person, the blizzard itself. So that's closer to what's happening. Even that is not the entirety of what's happening. That's just some of what's happening, but it's something like that. So when it says, when it has God saying things like, I will cause such and such, it's not reflective of an emotional response from God's essence, but it is a characterization of what happens, which is a pretty, it's very close approximation to what actually happens. In other words, the final results. We know this because unfortunately we've gone through them, not just in Nach, but even in throughout history, we've gone through situations where there is a literal kind of realization of these kind of things, these terrible things. So it's something like that. Also, we had, and this was something that we were talking about last time, reference to Shemitah again towards the end. And I was suggesting to you that if you wanted to speak of like a section of the Torah that this is a part of, there's a kind of definite beginning and there's a kind of definite end. The beginning is at the beginning of chapter 25, and that's the Torah portion of Bahar. And then there's the end, which is the end of the part that we read this last time. And it's sort of interesting that at the beginning, there's a discussion of Shemitah, and at the end, there's a discussion of Shemitah. Here it's saying that we're gonna end up being in exile in order to sort of make up for the fact that that the Shemitah wasn't kept. There's something, so there's some kind of connection to the Shemitah and the troubles that are happening here, and so that it forms the end of this section, which also has at the very end, Elah hachukim v'mishpatim v'torah asher nasan Hashem beino uvein bnei Yisrael b'har Sinai b'yad Moshe. So again, it references Mount Sinai, and that's how it started in the Bahar Sinai. That's how the Torah portion Bahar gets its name, because it says these are things God said, Bahar Sinai. So you have Har Sinai at the beginning, you have Har Sinai at the end, and you have Shemitah at the beginning, you have Shemitah at the end. Again, it's not exactly the same because you have Shemitah immediately in the beginning. Here you don't have Shemitah immediately, but it's in the last few verses. So it would be the way the chapters are divided. This you could say it's like a complete set. Chapters 25 and 26 form some kind of a complete set. And now we're going to move on in chapter 27. Just a little something about the Shemitah there. Several years ago, I was sharing something with Aviva Zornberg. It was a moment I had with some nieces and nephews and my kids. It must have been, I don't know if it was Pesach or Sukkot, but we were in St. Louis, and I was asking if we were talking about Yosef and his brothers, and how Yosef and his brothers, the discord between Yosef and his brothers leads to exile. After all, Yosef is sent into exile, and then his family follows, and then while we're as a family in Egypt, so slavery starts and we become an enslaved nation in Egypt. So it seems just from the narrative of the Torah that the discord between the brothers leads to exile. So I asked my sons and nieces and nephews if they could think of earlier stories like that. So I was expecting them to go back to Yaakov and Esav, because after the discord between Yaakov and Esav, Yaakov ends up going into exile. So you have Yosef and his brothers leading to exile, and then you have Yaakov and Esav leading to exile, and that's what I was expecting them. But they went farther back. One of my nephews, Hanania, said Cain and Abel. So with Cain and Hevel, you also have it. You have. I mean, it ends up worse than these cases, because in Cain and Abel, he actually kills Abel, he kills Hevel, but then he has to wander. He goes into exile. So you have this pattern. You have Cain and Abel, and then the result of the discord between Cain and Abel is exile. And then you have Yaakov and Esav, and the result of the discord between Yaakov and Esav is exile for Yaakov. And then you have Yosef and his brothers, and the result of the discord between Yosef and his brothers is exile. So I was presenting this as a pattern to Aviva Zornberg, and she said, you should add Shemitah to that list. Now, at first blush, Shemitah doesn't seem to be a story of brothers in discord. Shemitah is about letting the land lay fallow. But then she pointed out that there's a whole nother part to Shemitah, which we saw at the end of Parshas Bahar, which in Parshas Bahar, that you are supposed to let your loans be amnestied. In other words, when you lend money to another person, and then the Shemitah comes, at the end of the Shemitah, the loan becomes amnestied, it's forgiven. You're supposed to let the land forgiven. So if people do not forgive their loans, that would be a betrayal between brothers. And also you could say the land laying fallow, because land laying fallow also could be a problem between brothers, because you're denying access to your land and the produce of your land. Let's say you have orchards. So if you have orchards, the fruit is going to grow naturally that next year. What is supposed to happen with that fruit? It's supposed to be made available to everybody. Everybody's supposed to get access to it. So if you're not observing the Shemitah, that means that you're not giving access to other people to the fruit that is growing on your land. So there are various ways that Shemitah itself is an example of a kind of dispute or discord between brothers. And she was suggesting it belongs in that list. So there's something about this discord amongst brothers that leads to exile, where exile is the proper response. You have to sort of leave what does exile mean? That you're no longer on your property, that you're no longer where you're supposed to be, that you're in a place where you are vulnerable and subject to, to all sorts of trouble, because you were in some kind of deep dispute with your brother. That somehow one of the conditions for being in your proper place, and especially in the land of Israel, is that there be peace amongst brothers, which is sort of interesting, because that means that when the reward is peace in the land, because it says, if you follow all my statutes, etc., one of the results will be there will be peace in the land. So it's not, you could say that the reward of peace in the land, and that you are not subject to that we're not subject to our enemies, is not just a reward like a cherry on a pie. It's but actually also a kind of measure for measure, because how do I get to the point where I'm keeping what God wants me to keep? That means that that I've made peace with my brother. I'm looking out for my brother, and so in my relationships with others, I am making best effort to make peace. So therefore, it makes sense that there should be peace in the land, and also that I should be able, and that the land, will be. I'll be able to work the land, and it'll be productive, etc. That's only possible because I've made sure that there's cooperation with my brother and peace with my brother. So the fact that would be the resulting kind of blessing also would come from the work that I'm doing. It would be a reflection of my service of God. Okay.
Rabbi,
yeah.
It almost seems like God has a relationship with the land like he did with the Jewish people. He starts out with this land in the Garden of Eden. It's a totality. And then his love, like his love for one people, seems to, be reduced to a love for one land where he doesn't want people there. He'll vomit them out because he loves that land. And there's that connection between his love for the land, which becomes Israel, and his love for the Jewish people through Abraham. I mean,
there is language like that his eyes are towards the land, etc. But something about the land, that his eyes are towards it, and again, it is. I think it would be hard to deny there's just a lot of parallel to the garden. When you see the garden presented, it's not presented as a garden for man. It's God's garden.
right.
Man coming as the gardener.
Yeah.
Right. So he's not just like giving man a place, his own garden. No, it's God's garden, and man's working in God's garden. Yeah. So there's this notion. I mean, it's very much in the Hasidic. This is that Hasidic notion that's very much emphasized by Chabad, which is that God creates the world to make a dira b'tachtonim, to make a living place in the lower worlds. In other words, obviously these are highly poetic and metaphoric, but this notion that if you ask like a Lubavitcher, why did God create the world? This is the soundbite. The soundbite is he created the world to make a dira b'tachtonim, so that he could have a living place in the lower worlds. So there's something about the world that is meant kind of ultimately to be a place for God to reside. Now, where would they see hints of that? Even in the time, they don't have to have. I mean, obviously, this is coming from an oral tradition, but you could see hints to it in this language, in the language of Gan Eden, and the language about the land of Israel. Also, we saw him say, Ki li haaretz, right? He said that at the end of Bahar, the land is mine. At one place he says, I give you the land, right? But we saw him say,
Where'd you go?
going back to chapter 20, I have to go to chapter 25 here because I'm trying to, why you don't, are you there? Oh,
I'm
Liz.
here.
Oh, no, for some, do you not see us? All right, one second here. All right, here we go. Chapter 25. It's funny. I find this frustrating when it's so miraculous that we even
And God even gets mad at the land. I mean, because it received the blood of Abel, I curse the land. I mean, there's this
also at
relationship.
Noach, by the way, at Noach, if you look at the language at the flood, the real destruction is of the land. The people, if you look carefully at the language, and Rabbi Foreman even points this out, it sounds like the people and the animals are dying because they happen to be on the land. But really the land is the thing that's being really viciously, here, we'll go back to that, but I want to see the language where he said this. It was in here somewhere. And now if I'm listening to a recorded class or I'm watching a recorded class and somebody can't remember where something is, here it is. The land is mine. You're just strangers, residents on the land with me, but the land is mine. That's such a strong language there. Also, let's just look back at that Noah thing. And it was what I was saying was, like, sometimes if you have a recorded class and somebody is looking for something and you know where it is and you want to shout it, but they can't hear you, like, I know there's a verse like this here. It's somewhere. Where is it? All right. Okay, let's see here.
Yep.
The
And
earth
even that
became
last,
corrupt.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Verse 11. V'tishachetz ha'aretz lifnei Elokim. V'timilei ha'aretz chamas. The earth became corrupt before God. The earth was filled with lawlessness. And God saw how corrupt it was, for all the flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. But see, what's the primary subject? The primary subject is the earth.
Yeah. And even our thing we were just reading.
I'm about to destroy them with the earth. See that? V'hineni mashchisam es haaretz. I'm going to destroy them with the earth. But he's angry at the earth.
Yeah.
And then at one point, when it actually describes it, you see, like he.
Oh.
And all existence on earth was blotted out. Humans, cattle, creeping things of the birds in the sky, they were blotted on the earth. Only Noah was left. And then the waters had swelled on the earth. Can't remember all the cause. God had caused him to go. That one is not strong. But anyways. Yeah, anyways. Okay. So now we are going to a different subject. All right. So Liz, do you have your text with you?
I should. I don't see it in front of me, but then I'm a little
Okay.
disorganized.
You don't have to. You don't have to.
I have it.
All right.
What?
All right, Lois, chapter 27.
Yes.
All right. We're going to read about what they call erchin.
The
So
beginning
take
of.
chapter 27.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, if a man articulates a vow to Hashem regarding a valuation of living beings, the valuation of a male shall be for someone 20 years to 60 years of age. The valuation shall be 50 silver shekels of the sacred shekel. If she is a female, the valuation shall be 30 shekels. And if from 5 to 20 years of age, the valuation of a male shall be 20 shekels and of a female 10 shekels. And if from 1 month to 5 years of age, the valuation of a male shall be 5 silver shekels, and for a female, the valuation shall be 3 silver shekels. And if from 60 years and up, if for a male, the valuation shall be 15 shekels, and for a female, 10 shekels. But if he is too poor for the valuation, then he should cause him to stand before the Kohen, and the Kohen shall evaluate him according to what the person making a vow can afford, should the Kohen evaluate him.
Okay. Now that, yeah. So this is called erchin.
Do you have a problem with that, Lois?
Erchin. Wait, just 1 second before we go. So it's called erchin, and it is a way of donating to the Beit HaMikdash. So there are several different ways you can make donations to the Beit HaMikdash. This is one of them, where you would say, my value, I'm donating my value to the Beit HaMikdash, or my wife's value, or my son's value, or my neighbor's value. So it's a way nowadays. The most common way for us to donate is in increments of chai. So somebody, you could even sometimes hear somebody say 10 times chai, or something like that. So that is probably the most common way of doing it. There were other ways of making donations, and this was one of them, where you would donate the value of a person. Now, at first blush, obviously it's troublesome. Why is it that the value of a man is different than the value of a woman? And somebody could at first blush say that the reason that the value is different is because the valuation is based on work, or in other words, that this person's value is based on like a slave, like a slave. When you buy a slave, you're valuing them based on their potential productivity. So you could say that in the workplace, the likelihood is that men are going to be able to do heavier work or things like that, and therefore they're worth more. The problem with that is that that wouldn't be a reason to say that under 5. Why should there be a difference in value under 5? Clearly, under 5 has nothing to do with their ability to work or to do something like that. And if it is based on their ability to work, the argument would be made at that age, girls, are growing quicker, they're stronger and more likely to be productive than boys at a young age. So if this was really just based on productivity, that's not a good argument. And the other thing is that it doesn't appear to be a good argument. The other thing is that a woman, and we've seen this in other places, a woman is capable of producing other people. So if you're counting that kind of value, productive value, and you're dealing with a woman, especially at a stage where she's capable of having children, you would think that in certain ways it would be more valuable to have a woman than it would be to have a man, because so if you're basing it on the value as far as productivity is concerned, you'd have a lot of hard work to do to try to explain this, because this is across the board. It's always the men are somehow worth more than the women, no matter what stage. Also, like an old man, like why is an old man still more valuable than an old woman? That it should, in many ways, it should be the other way around. Women tend to live longer than men, and the kind of productivity that we stereotypically look for women to do continues even when they're older. Whereas the kind of productivity you're looking to from men does not. They end up peaking and then they're not that productive. So the productivity argument doesn't seem to be a good one. Do you have any thoughts or comments that you'd like to?
I just have a question, because I'm kind of confused about how this works. You articulate a vow regarding the valuation of is that the person themselves gives?
No, you could say, no, you say, this is what you say. It's like you're donating. So you'd say, like, this could be like in shul, you would say, I'm donating, instead of saying chai, you would say, I'm donating my erech, my value, or the
My
erech
value. Okay, so it's your
or it
value.
could be somebody else's. I'm doing my erech, I'm doing my wife's erech. What if it's a bar mitzvah? If it's your kid's bar mitzvah, I donate 5 times his value. I donate 10 times his value. So you're just doing it in increments of his value, and they're giving you a chart here. Now, the benefit of this chart, just having a chart in general, is that you get to see how you work other things out. There's damages and things like that, because once you see that there's some kind of chart for here, you could model this and use this for other cases. But the chart itself, the valuation itself, is certainly troubling. Certainly in a modern age, it's considered troubling. But I'm just wondering if you have any commentary or any thoughts. Yeah, Linda.
So I thought it's not really that positive, but it said, it didn't mention that it said a man is worth this, a woman is worth this based on ages. It didn't say anything about physical disabilities. It didn't say anything about wealth. So it was saying at least male, female were equal. That's the only positive. I mean, they're not equal, but all men.
Within males. In other words, within males.
All males, regardless of disability or wealth, are worth this, and all women, regardless of disabilities or wealth, are worth this.
Which, by the way, this is something that Thomas Cahill emphasizes in his book, The Gift of the Jews. I don't know if he mentions this in particular, but something like this, where he does talk about the Torah as a sort of standalone document in that age, when it comes to the asserting the value of every human being. In other words, that in other cultures and in other texts from those times, there is a distinction made between, if you're a royal, your life is worth recording. So, for instance, in ancient texts, there might be genealogies, but there'll be genealogies just of royals, or there'll be genealogies of the gods, but there won't be a genealogy of just a regular family, that includes everybody in the family.
And it's not saying a chacham is any more valuable than a not chacham.
Right. And so there are what sort of democratic kind of notions that are expressed in the Torah that you don't find in other documents. This could be another example, what you're pointing out here. Maybe he even mentions it, I don't know. That, like you said, that within the categories, there's no distinction made. Are you a royal person? Are you not a royal person? Are you a wealthy person? Are you not a wealthy person? Are you physically able? Are you not physically able? So that's a very interesting point, and I think a big point. That could be a very big point. But again, you still have this. You still have this, and again, even if you would say that it's stereotypically attached to some kind of value in the marketplace, but why maybe, I don't know, you could say a 5-year-old boy has a different value in the marketplace because he's going to grow into a man, and therefore he's going to be able to do physical labor. So you're buying it. It's not his value for this minute, but it's sort of like, what is he worth now? Because eventually he's going to grow into that. Because otherwise, what is it? I mean, it's not just because you don't. Why would there be a different monetary value to somebody? It has to be related to something. It has to be related to productivity or something. What else could it be?
One of the notes that I have refers to Exodus 30:13, where it says that 20 years, well, that's 14, is the Israelites' military age. And that's what
Right.
they're referring to.
Right, but all right, so you're saying he has more value because he can fight as a soldier.
Yeah,
Mhm.
maybe.
But what about the old man? The old man can't fight as a soldier. And also, you can't say that the old man is about his value in the future. Like with the kid, maybe the 5-year-old, you're saying, okay, he's worth more because eventually he's going to grow into a soldier. But the old man's not eventually growing into a soldier, and the old man.
No, but he is reduced, but his value is reduced because he's no longer a soldier. He
I
can no
know, but
longer-
why is he worth more than a woman now?
Well, that.
I see it's
that I'm
reduced,
not
but
sure.
That's
Yeah.
just sexist.
no, I'm saying
No.
but I'm saying if you say that it was connected to be, you're saying it's connected to being a soldier. The men fought, the women didn't fight. Let's say
Right.
it was connected to being a soldier. And let's say you could even, so the other question would be, what about the people younger than the soldier? Why are the boys worth more than the girls? Because you could say, well, the boy eventually is going to be a soldier, so you're investing now because eventually he's going to be more valuable because he's going to be able to be a soldier. But what about the old man? The old man is no longer a soldier, and he's not going to be a soldier in the future. So why is his value?
It's very
more?
simple. It's very
Yeah.
simple. Men have egos. They don't want to be worth the same as a woman.
Yeah, you could say that. I'm saying you could say that. You could say something like that. You could say that, I guess. I would only want to say that if I didn't have another more
Leviticus.
practical thing to say. But we're running out of the practical things. So far, we've had physical labor and we've had soldiers. Those are two practical things, and they fall apart. They fall apart
With women.
at the old, with
Yeah.
the old men. No, they fall
Rabbi?
apart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with,
yeah.
yeah.
Rabbi,
the old
why
men.
did they put a
Yeah.
monetary value on people? What
Yes,
was the reason for
good
this?
question. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that, I guess, that is probably the most basic question here. Why is there? All right. So if there's damages, if this was a chart that was reflective of damages, so, and you just have to say they're doing it because somebody has to pay damages, right? But this is not damages. This is not damages at all. So why is there any monetary value at all associated with people? Why is there any monetary value? Why would somebody even do this? My value. I could see somebody saying, like, I could hear somebody perhaps suggesting that it's my way of offering myself. So I translate myself, like when I donate the money, it's as if I offered myself. Also there are things like head tax. There's a head tax, a half shekel tax. That's for men between the age of 20 and 60. They're the only ones who pay that head tax. Now you could say because they're paying it, they tend to be head of household, something like that. So you could say they're sort of paying head of household. But there's one number. It's the same for everybody. And it's being donated for the purpose of the public offerings or for some other things. So why are you having some kind of value? And why a value that shifts at different stages of life? Why are you translating a value? Yeah. So again, my first thought is that it's a way of representing you. But then why should it be? Why should there be a number like this? Yeah. Yeah. And why should there be a fixed number? Just give whatever you think the value is. Why is there a number for you? And why is it a fixed number? And why is the number different for men and women?
The only exception there is when
Based
you're
on physical strength,
what? I'm sorry.
based on physical strength.
But again, an
Maybe.
old man and an old woman.
Woman, right.
Right. Is it old?
The only exception is that poor person who can't afford his valuation or her valuation, I guess.
Right.
And
And
then
then they figure out a valuation that they can afford. Right. Yeah. So those are our questions. These are important questions. First of all, why is there a value at all? Second of all, why does the value change? And third of all, why is the value different for men and women? Those are the questions.
there must be some commentary, some writing of somebody.
Of course there is, but I don't like to jump.
And
to it.
everybody's is different.
Oh, we have
Well,
to figure it out first.
Yes.
Then-
I don't like to jump to, because these are,
Yeah.
I like to think about these before we jump to what other people say. Yeah. Have we seen anything like this before? We have the head tax that was mentioned in the Torah portion of Ki Sisa, that was in Exodus.
Right.
We do have, again, there is the value, if you injure somebody. Oh, I know, there is if you kill somebody. There's a certain amount. Is that one different for men and women? Remember that? If that's going back to, let's go back to.
I don't remember that being a difference.
Here, let's see, if somebody
Yeah. I don't know.
accidentally kills somebody, there was like a, right? If somebody accidentally kills somebody, that's at Mishpatim somewhere. If let's say if somebody's animal accidentally kills another person, right?
Going too fast for me.
I'm sorry. Here they have, if two parties fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and miscarriage results, the one responsible should be fined according as the woman's husband may exact the payment to be based on reckoning. If other damage ensues, the penalty should be life for life, eye for eye. But it says only according to reckoning by a miscarriage. All right, and then we have here. Here, if a ransom is imposed, here it is. If an animal gores and it's gored several times before, and then the animal kills a man or a woman, the ox will be stoned, and its owner too shall be put to death. If a ransom is imposed, the owner must pay whatever is imposed to redeem the owner's own life. Again, there's some kind of money that's paid, but it doesn't say how much. And then it says, but if the ox scores a slave, male or female, the owner has to pay 30 shekel of silver to the master, and the ox is stoned. Here, there's no difference between male or female. Why not? Male or female, 30 shekel. It's a fixed amount. Why isn't it different? Why isn't it different based on age? Why isn't it different based on male and female? It's not. Just 30 shekel.
Maybe because it's a slave.
But whatever, right? I mean, so I guess if you're going back to that pride thing, if you go back to the pride thing, then maybe you would say that's a distinction between slaves and free people, that we're not concerned about the pride of slaves. Again, I'd just like to say out loud that we do not condone slavery nowadays and would never want to go back to slavery. Whenever we talk about slavery, it's only because they had slaves in those days. But we don't believe that it's a good thing, and we don't believe it should be done nowadays. But maybe, I guess if you did say that pride thing, then I could hear a distinction between slaves and free people, like what Estelle is saying, because there's no. Okay, this is the beginning of something. I think the game is afoot, as Sherlock Holmes would say. The game.
You have a whole week to research it.
Yes, we do. And I am grateful. And I'm especially grateful that we're all together, that the gang's all here. Hail,
Yes,
hail, the gang's
hail.
all here. And wish you a wonderful Hanukkah, and everybody should be well and good health. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week.